Welcome to Thoughts Matter. We discuss politics, paradigms, philosophies. We cover the thoughts and thinkers that impact our lives. Today you're about to watch a conversation that I had with Michael Bruxvoort. The topic is one that I hope many of you will find relevant. Whether you're having this discussion with your kids or trying to figure this out for yourself, I hope you enjoy this talk. Do you want to talk about dating?
Dating? Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd love to talk about dating. It's something I'm very invested in right now.
Yeah.
At this stage of life, actually.
How so?
Well, I happen to be doing it. I know that's not strictly true. Technically, I haven't been on a date in 3.5 months. 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah, because my girlfriend is over in Lebanon, so dating is a lot more difficult when there's an ocean between the two of you.
I can imagine.
You know, dating is a fascinating topic because I think almost more than anything you'll find divergence and very little agreement between sort of what the world thinks and what Christians might think is appropriate or good or helpful in dating. You know, I've had so many friends tell me that, like, I'm crazy for not having sex with my girlfriend because how are you going to know if you're compatible with that person?
Sure.
You know, and these are the people that already are operating under the assumption that dating might be looking towards marriage, which not everyone has that perspective.
Right.
Yeah, so I constantly find myself when I'm talking to people, it's two planes flying on the sea like ships past each other.
Freeze. I hope you didn't miss, like I did, the beautiful butchering of a metaphor that Michael just let slip.
It's two planes flying on the sea like ships past each other.
That's priceless. So let's clarify, I guess, some of your base assumptions. So you assume that dating is necessarily for marriage, not.
Yeah, I don't think recreational dating is a it's not a fair thing to do. I don't think.
Okay,
to
explain
people.
that.
Dating will involve emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of the whole. If even if you're doing it recreationally, that's why you're doing it. Is you're trying to evoke a certain level of enjoyment from the process of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no matter what level of intimacy you get into, and I think that a lot of people don't recognize the sorts of ties that you create when you date. You know, for enjoying that intimacy and so when you date recreationally, when you do it simply to enjoy the process of it, as opposed to looking towards some goal, which for me would be marriage, it's just a damaging thing because you're inviting someone into a relationship that you have no intention of prolonging.
And I think that most people would probably agree with you there.
I think so.
I don't
know that there's many people who recreational date.
I think that
way.
It's simply that people aren't as intentional in dating as perhaps would be wise, and I think that we all can fall prey to that. But I think that, I don't think we don't need to have like a debate with a straw man where it's like I think everyone assumes that dating is that somewhere down the line you're trying to find your soulmate or your partner or whatever.
Though I do think that the result is often similar. It looks like that.
So I think that you're exactly right.
The lack of intentionality creates this phenomena that looks like it's this serial dating sort of.
And you look at
thing
at a young age as well. I think that's where you see what is considered recreational dating because. No one's seriously considering marriage at that point. So at that age, it can't be anything else. It's that, or it's maybe practice for when you're more serious about dating, for when you might want to get married, or you're just hoping that you might chance to meet your sweetheart. So that's I guess there is still sort of a vague goal towards marriage there, but it's a lot harder to justify in that case.
I think it's simply people don't take responsibility for their choices.
Okay.
They don't. So I'm a strange human when it comes to dating. Like I didn't do it normally. I think I've only ever really dated twice. One time it was, this is long distance too now, but it wasn't at first. But the first relationship I was ever in, I was in this sort of long-term pseudo relationship, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be there because we were attracted to each other and she had sort of initiated things, and I wasn't sure if I was on board with it. Now, granted, I am coming from the presumption that like I really want to pursue a relationship to marriage, and I'd rather avoid heartbreak along the way if I can, you know. And people give you drivel. I think it's drivel. This is a personal opinion. It's a very caustic opinion on people who say, oh, well, you need to learn through those hard experiences, you know. I'm all for learning from other people. I have learned the hard way many times. I've also avoided a lot of pitfalls by not having to learn the hard way. You know? It's just, take people's advice. Take their wisdom. They didn't say these things for no reason. So avoiding heartbreak along the way seemed like a good idea. So I didn't actually... I had a major crush in high school that I never told her that I was interested in her because I knew that I had no job, I had no degree, I was in high school, there was no way that I could make this feasible at the time. And I know people who, they married their high school sweetheart, and that's great. You know, it works out for some people. For me, I was just like, I was not ready to take that step. And I think intuitively, part of why it didn't work out with the first girl that I dated, and why it has worked out with the current girl that I'm dating, is that my responsibility in the situation has changed. Like, I've taken that responsibility. Now I'm 28
responsibility
years old.
for not breaking something, not breaking someone's heart, or what exactly are you taking responsibility for?
I'm taking responsibility for how I pursue that individual.
The consequences.
Yeah, the consequences. I'm not simply saying let's have a good time together and see where it goes. I'm saying you're a person I enjoy being with, and I could see myself spending a life with you if this goes well. So I'm going to pursue you, you know. And I think, you know, I mean, this is where I think the Christian perspective really changes what relationships should look like.
Sure.
Because when I started dating Elisa, I said, my first goal is to serve this person. Mm-hmm. If we break after a month, if we break up after 2 months, if we break up after 3 months, if I never see her again, I want her to have been blessed by the fact that we were together. Even if it's a painful experience and we both walk away and it was hard, I want her to be able to look back and say, well, but he served me well. You know, he looked after my interests, and even during the hard parts, you know, he was trying to make it less hard. He was trying to make it easier, you know, and that was my intention, because I knew that any marriage that's going to succeed is also based on that principle, that if we're going to share a life together, it's going to be a good life if I seek first to serve her, mm-hmm. and to look after her well-being first. And coming at it from that perspective, and I think intrinsically that many people feel like that's what they do in relationships. But what's actually happening is two people are finding that I don't mind doing this for you, and I think it's really great that you do this for me. And since we're both being pleased by this, it must be a good thing. Hmm. That's what it's based on. My resolve to serve Elisa was, in theory, and I'm not a perfect person, and I don't actually live by the principles that I claim, but the idea was to serve her regardless of how she treated me. So even if the relationship turned sour, and I had to bring that to light and say, this is not actually working out, I still wanted to do that in an attitude of service. Right. So I think that's one of the fundamental differences. I think that's a good clarification on taking responsibility for the consequences of dating. I mean, absolutely, yeah. I think it's helpful to realize that all dating relationships have to end at some point. They either end in marriage, absolutely, or they dissolve, or they become sour, or whatever. But any dating relationship, it's going to. I don't want to date for the rest of my life. Right. Well, and people do. I don't think anyone wants to just perpetually date. I mean, some people do, but I think in general, most people see it as a temporary state. Yeah. Ideally, anyway. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a little bit about kind of the younger generation, what's good there, but now let's bring it more. I think we're both in a position where we're more actually ready to get married. You know, so for us, how is it? I think you still see a lot of people, especially a lot of Christian people, too afraid too worried about breaking someone's heart, that they become
overly cautious and they're not willing to even start something. So I think that there's a lot of timidness you'll see in the Christian community, especially.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on combating that? Should they combat that? Is that a problem? Is that the result of a good thing? Is that a good thing in and of itself?
I don't know if you can actually push back against that problem in and of itself. And the reason that I don't know, and I honestly haven't given a lot of thought to that particular question until you raised it just now. And the reason is because the problem is based, I believe, in a cultural narrative of relationship. Mm-hmm. Where breaking someone's heart is the trope of, 30 to 50% of the movie industry.
Right.
And it's this huge thing that happens to a person. It's this tragedy of having a broken heart.
Maybe that's an exaggerated story.
It takes an element of a person's life and defines their story by that element.
Yeah.
A marriage is a huge part of a person's existence, but it is not who they are.
Yeah. Or our identities shouldn't be wrapped up in someone else.
Right.
That's not Jesus Christ.
But even our efforts, like
right.
what are we focusing on? And I think this comes back to, like, if we want to talk about boundaries, within relationships, physical boundaries or emotional boundaries or all of these things, those questions I think would largely be nullified if we had a different approach to relationships in the first place.
Okay, expand on that.
Okay. If
and I do want to get to boundaries, by the way.
Yes,
because I think that's a very practical part of this discussion.
This will lead into that because the idea of breaking a heart means that two hearts have already been joined. Mm-hmm. You have put so much effort into this relationship because you've idolized it. You've lifted it up into this unnaturally high position in your perspective of the world, and your identity of yourself, all of that, to where when that's taken away, you have very little of yourself. You feel like you have very little of yourself left.
And this is part of where I come to the boundary discussion. I think this is interesting because there's this idea that when you're dating someone, they should feel secure in you, as a partner, right? That they should feel good about about your relationship, right? That they should feel like, we're going solid, or we've been. I feel safe around him. I think that and you want to feel safe, but there's this idea that you're safe in that relationship. That's where that relationship is safe. That's secure, and I think that even though it can come from, I think, good intentions, it's what you're saying. It's kind of pushing it beyond, one step beyond what dating should be.
Well,
and I was talking about this with a friend, and we were.
Pardon me.
It's a hard talk because you do want, just by being a kind person and a good partner, it's almost natural for you both to start to feel safe. But if you feel safe, then you've kind of gone one step beyond what dating should be, because dating, there is no actual commitment in dating.
No.
The commitment comes when you propose. But in dating, there at any point either one of you can break
and
that commitment. It's a faux commitment. It's not a real commitment. And
it's
so,
a faux commitment.
I mean, that's
it's funny because Elisa and I went through this thing where we started dating in January, and then March came around and I was like, I'm going to ask this girl to be my girlfriend. I'm going to take the next step.
Right.
Which wasn't really
I mean,
and really changed? At that, the only thing that's changed, I think, in that place, and this is, I think, a valid step to take, is that you're saying, I'm not going to be dating other people.
Yes,
now.
Exclusivity. Totally got it. Exclusivity is good, and if
girlfriend,
that's the next
defined
step,
girlfriend, boyfriend,
right.
we are that. We're not just going on dates anymore. We're going to be dating one another.
But
security. I think that it is one of those desires, like intimacy, and it could be that one person is looking for security, the other person is looking for intimacy. Pursuing the things that marriage gives you may be instead of just pursuing the answer to the question, you're pursuing the elements of the answered question. Right.
It's not intentionally dishonest, but when you try to provide this sense of security to the person you're dating, because it's kind of an active thing. You sort of provide that sense of security, right? You extend it, and you want them to feel safe around you and safe in your relationship.
In a sense, though, it's a kind of play acting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just dishonest in the end, because at any point that relationship could end. You know, until you've actually, you know, made a commitment, until you've actually proposed marriage or been married, there is no actual commitment there that's tangible. And so any commitment that you've made is premature, because if you really wanted to marry them, if you really were making a commitment, then you would propose. There are some exceptions where you're waiting until you have enough money to get married, and that's and that's why you're waiting to propose, and you don't want to have a long engagement. I understand that, and so there are definitely exceptions, but I think that there's a lot of times this sense, and even then though, there really shouldn't be a sense of security, because if you don't have enough money to get married, there's still something that's keeping you from asking the person to marry you, then there's still a chance that that's not where the relationship will go. And so why provide a sense of security? It's inherently somewhat dishonest. Yeah. You just don't need to force the security. So, well, and I think we're getting close to the end. We've almost exhausted this topic, but I think that there's still a little bit more we can say about boundaries specifically. And this is a hard thing to talk about, because you don't want to prescribe anyone for anyone else, and there are always it's hard. But I think let me just lay out kind of where I have drawn the line. Yeah. And I'm not even confident in this, but this is sort of my line of thinking. It's not really mine. It's I got a lot of these ideas from a book that was very helpful. It's called Sex, Dating, and Relationships. And who is it by, Aaron?
J. Thomas.
J. Thomas, I think. So
pastor of Chapel above the Church.
Okay. So J. Thomas, Sex, Dating, and Relationships. If you want to look it up, I thought it was very helpful. But it talks about the fact that the Bible doesn't make a distinction between... the Bible basically lays out 3 different categories of people. You've got your family, your neighbors, and your spouse. Right? Yeah. And that's it. There is no special other category of dating relationship where you're allowed the intimacy of marriage without the commitment of marriage. You know, it's like there isn't this special dating relationship.
The Bible doesn't hand you a handbook on how to approach marriage, even.
Right.
It doesn't. Well, it's true. It doesn't.
But it mentions marriage, right?
It mentions marriage.
And of course, the Bible doesn't talk about a lot of things. It doesn't talk about iPhones. Right. But we still can figure out, you know, how we're supposed to interact with.
But the point being is that there's not a sacred status given to
dating relationships. Exactly. And so I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but where I come, so when it comes to boundaries, I like to just kind of thinking it in terms of those are the categories that the Bible's prescribed. And so until someone has moved into the spouse category, they're still in the neighbor category.
Yes.
And you can treat them like you might someone in the family category, because you do that with friends and whatnot. But you shouldn't treat them like you would in the spouse category. And I think that the distinction there is the passion that's reserved for the spousal relationship, versus in the family. You might kiss your sister, you might hug your sister, whatever, right? But there's not going to be any passion. I mean, that's exactly, unless it's what is it, Gladiator and let's Marvin Gaye and get it on. But it's that passion should be reserved for marriage. So I guess that's sort of something that's helped me, just thinking I wouldn't do anything to my girlfriend that I wouldn't do to your sister, right? Yeah, which is a weird boundary, and that's not something that most people would take on. And I'm not prescribing that to anyone, but that's been helpful. What do you think about that?
I think the issue with boundaries is that we treat them like the goal. We're really good at mental gymnastics, and we're really good at jumping through hoops to get what we want without even knowing that we're doing it. Yeah. Putting those boundaries out there is just a really helpful tool. That's all it is. There's nothing moral about boundaries. There's nothing innately holy about boundaries. It's just a helpful tool. And if you want to live righteously, if you want to live according to God's principles, utilize the tool.
It's serious because it helps with what's in the heart. It helps with what's behind the actions.
Oh yeah, and that's because we're going to want to cross them. That's the point.
And I think to plug my own show, that's kind of why this show is called Thoughts Matter. I mean, it's not so much the actions or the boundaries. I mean, those help us dictate what actions happen. Yeah. But ultimately, it's what's in the heart, and that's what the boundaries are trying to kind of rein in. Just make sure that you don't get out of hand, and your heart doesn't get broken. And that's what matters. Crossing the boundaries isn't what matters.
It's not matter. It showed us
it's what's in your heart.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
what
matters.
It's like you said, it's about the heart. It's about the thoughts, and where we allow our minds to
go. And that's why people can go live relationships that are totally pleasing to God, that have none of the boundaries that you prescribed.
Absolutely.
And they're still able to live a life that's glorifying to God. Mm-hmm. and good. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to support this content, please subscribe below.